Alright, hello everybody! Welcome to another live stream by Force 13. Here tonight, streaming, covering all the activity in the tropics. Right now, we are incredibly busy. We have 7 active cyclones right now and 4 invests. We're going to be spending at least the next hour covering all these systems. Why don't you say hello, everyone? We're currently joined by David and Isaac.
Hi from South Texas.
And East Coast of Australia.
So currently we are incredibly active. I know you guys are pretty excited to talk about this. Let's turn that off. Here you can see my face here in the top right. You know, what we're actually going to start with tonight is going to be Ernesto, just because a lot of our people are interested in the Atlantic. Here's Ernesto right here on the screen right now. You saw the graphics earlier, 40 miles an hour, 1,008 millibars. Not looking really impressive today at all, if you guys agree with that statement.
I haven't looked at it yet. I'm just
satellite imagery on the screen really tells the story. I mean, it's definitely organized enough to be a storm, but it looks pretty abysmal, which is why they say it won't really strengthen much. You know.
Yes, I would support that. It's, well, I think I said yesterday, it looks a mess.
It really does. Convection isn't uniform, really. There's not really a lot of connected convection, if that's the way to say it, actually. It's more scattered and not really put together, although it is starting to go around the storm a bit more in general, if you guys would agree with that. Isaac, what are you saying about this?
Keep in mind that it is subtropical, so it's not going to look the best, just like Alberto was and many other storms so far this year. I think it has potential possibly intensifying slightly, but not too much, because it's going to be heading into that cold water and rapidly turn extratropical, I would imagine, as it heads over to the United Kingdom.
And National Hurricane Center has cited that it's supposed to peak at 50 miles an hour before going extratropical and heading towards the United Kingdom. By Friday in the morning, it's supposed to be gone, so it's supposed to be another short-lived system. It's really interesting. They noted this in their first advisory on the storm, that this is the 4th storm out of 5 this year that have been subtropical. And it's really rare to see. The most subtropical systems in one season has been 5, and we're only halfway through August, and we've already seen 4, which is pretty surprising to see at this point in time. Here's the current track again for Ernesto. Expected to move. It's moving north-northeast right now. It's going to turn northwest, head towards Ireland, the United Kingdom. Something else interesting is we have 99L down here as well. A tropical wave that has a 20% chance of development in the next 5 days. This is brand new. This was just tagged a few minutes ago, so I don't think we've really had much time to look at it. Have you guys gotten a chance to see it at all?
Not yet. I was just looking at the advisory on Ernesto. You want me to highlight that, or just?
Yeah, if you want to pull it up on your screen, go ahead.
Recent visible satellite imagery has shown a slight increase in convection near and to the east of the centre this afternoon, but there's been little change in the overall organisation of the subtropical storm. The satellite intensity estimate remains at, I think it's ST 2.5, so the initial wind speed remains 35 knots for this advisory. The NHC says it's forecast to remain over marginal warm sea surface temperatures and a low wind shear environment over the next 12 to 24 hours. However, it will be tracking over sea surface temperatures below 20 Celsius and into an area of increasing vertical wind shear. And it's expected to become a post-tropical cyclone in about 36 hours and merge with a frontal zone near Ireland and the United Kingdom 3 to 4 days.
Yep, and that's highlighted here where it says at 4 days in the forecast positions and maximums that's going to be merged. Post-tropical in 36 hours, extratropical in 72. I've noticed we've just been joined by Orlando. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great. It's very interesting how things are going in just a matter of days.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
been really active. I know this is to this point of the year, we were talking earlier, the second most active season on record up to this point in the Western Pacific, at least. I will get to that in
yeah,
a second. Right now, we can also look at Tropical Storm Lane in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, now expected to become a major hurricane. Um, definitely.
Thursday.
Yep, expected to become a major hurricane on Saturday, hurricane tomorrow and Thursday morning Pacific time. Long range could potentially pose a threat to Hawaii, but it's really too far out to say for certain. Um, Looking at satellite imagery, though, that we can pull up, the storm has definitely been looking more organized today than it was before.
And it's one system to watch. Current direction moving towards the west at 11 knots, and the center is near 10.6 north, 124.5 west.
Yeah, and the forecast model shows general westward motion for the next day before a start turn to the west northwest that will continue from days 2 to 5. Gradual intensification during that time. It's generally in pretty favorable conditions to handle intensification. Really, that's expected to continue. It is put at the forecast shows an initial peak at day 4 before slight weakening starts to occur at day 5. It's interesting to see that in general right now. Satellite imagery of the system, as we already showed, is not looking too bad at this point in time. Definitely warranting a tropical storm status. Pretty weak right now, though, as we said, it's only 45-mile-an-hour sustained winds. I think we should really move over to the Western Pacific, though, because that is where we currently see 4 active systems, 1 remnant system, and 2 invests, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll just going to bring that up.
Because here's the JTWC map right now. We have the remnants of Hector, which finally died off today. We have Tropical Storm Leepi, just recently weakened back into Tropical Depression Leepi. We have Tropical Storm Rumbia, Tropical Storm Bebinca, Tropical Depression 22, 91W, which is expected to develop, and 90W as well, which is not highlighted on this map at this point in time. So, like we just said a few minutes ago, this is the second most active Western Pacific season on record to this point in the year, with 22 named systems, or 22 tagged systems at this point in time. I think right now the biggest threat to land is Bebinca, crossed over southern Chinese Peninsula and Hainan Island earlier today, going to make landfall in Vietnam later as well. If we pull up the warning graphics for it right now, they're going to be all the way down here. A little bit out of date, but tropical storm force winds impacting Hainan Island right now. That will move just south of Hanoi, still bringing really heavy rain to the region, though. You can see a big burst of convection inland Vietnam now, and another band which is associated with the core of the system in the Bay of Tonkin right now. Although it's nice to see the system finally, get to the point where it's going away, it still poses, a big danger. For the past week now, it's been in almost the same position, delivering torrential rains to the region. Definitely a really big threat to the area.
And I think we're talking about Bebinca.
Yep.
There's tropical storm warning in place by the Vietnam Meteorological Hydrological Administration. They have it at 20.6 degrees north, 109.4 degrees west. Classification, as we said, is tropical storm. Maximum sustained winds 76 kilometers an hour. However, they have it at that intensity.
I think they say 35
for
knots
the next
right now,
24
right?
hours. And then Saturday, and they have it as a tropical low at 28 kilometers an hour. And the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has finalized their position on Leepi, and Hector.
Yep.
And for Bebinca, what are they saying? I just look at the technical information.
Yeah, right here, here's the track from the JTWC on Bebinca. They
Okay.
forecast slight intensification to 40 knots in the Bay of Tonkin before it makes landfall and rapidly dissipates as it moves inland through Vietnam.
Tropical
Orlando,
storm.
I don't know if you've been looking at this, Orlando, but have you gotten a chance to see this?
Have a chance to see what?
Bebinca, up to this point.
Oh, no, actually.
All right, David, what have you been looking at with Bebinca then?
It's located 117 nautical miles south-southwest of Hong Kong, tracking east-southeast at 2 knots. That's over the last 6 hours, and unfortunately the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre isn't providing regular information. We're looking at what's taken place over the last 6 hours. Satellite imagery depicts a compact system with flaring deep convection obscuring the low-level circulation. And it showed a poorly defined centre just west of the deepest convection. Isaac?
Yeah, and that's just shown. It looks more like a ball right now than anything else. It has its main convection in the Bay of Tonkin, and then a whole other set of convection all the way off inland Indochina right now already. We still have, 3 other systems to discuss in the region right now, so let's get to that right now. We have Tropical Depression 22, which could be a big threat down the line for Japan at this point. It's currently at 30 knot sustained winds, if I'm not mistaken, expected to intensify into a typhoon and eventually maybe pose a threat to southern Japan. Tokyo all the way to the Ryukyu Islands are already in the 5-day cone, expected to be there as a typhoon. If you look towards the left side of the screen, you'll see computer models depicting, or the GFS run, depicting what may happen with the storm. The first one you see right here now is going to be 22. GFX expects it to be at least a Category 2 typhoon making landfall in southern Japan. It's looking really, really broad right now. If I pull up some satellite imagery of it, not impressive at all. Have you seen this at all, David?
I'm looking at it now. The JTWC is doing 3-hourly advisory, so the imagery only. I've got their track on the screen, and they have it. I think it's northwest of Graham, so 22 is the next major system, and straight to the east of 22 we have 91W.
We do, and according to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, it's expected to develop, but not within the next 24 hours. If you look at the computer model again on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see it develop southeast of 22W, and near the end of the model run pose another potential risk to Japan, which has already seen really high levels of rain since early July. They've already experienced lots of flooding. Definitely not helped by the fact that there was 2 typhoons impacting them. Shanshan and Jeongdari impacted them within the past month as well. So really a situation that we really don't want to see at all with this. Do you have any imagery that you want to pull up with this, David?
For 91W, just give me a minute. We'll have a look at the floaters for...
Yep. And also, just while he's pulling that up, I'd like to quickly go over Rumbia, Tropical Storm Rumbia, which is in the Western Pacific as well. It's a broad area of low pressure that has centralized into a tropical storm, impacting a similar area to where Yagi impacted less than a week ago. It's expected to move generally northwestward. I'll pull up the warning graphic for it right now. There's a lot of stuff up here. It's supposed to move west-northwest and then turn west and make landfall right around Shanghai as a tropical storm. So even more rain for a region that's been struck by at least 2 systems within the past month as well. So definitely not something we're really looking at or enjoying to see at all for the region. It's just Japan and Shanghai have been hit particularly hard in the past month with this really active Western Pacific Ocean.
I would like to mention that Nathan Strat and I were talking about the Westpac activity earlier today, and we're on path to equal the 1971 season.
And that was the most
That's
active on
for the
record?
Westpac. We're level pegging with 1996, but 1971 there were 27 named storms. And I think we're one off the total for 1996, but
by the end of this week we could already be at 23.
Yes, so
because they do expect 91W to develop.
1971. And Strat, I think with what we're saying, these low pressure systems are just constant. And
yeah, they've been really coming left and right.
Yeah, but I reckon we're going to pass or equal 1971.
Yeah, I mean, if we're at 23 by the end of this week and models later down the line, of course you can't really trust models more than 5 days out, but they're trying to develop some more, you know, we're really at a point where we could see this being one of the most active seasons that we can really think of in recent history. David, do you want to pull up some satellite imagery of one of the systems?
I have some satellite imagery of the storms that I sent in chat.
We're looking for some Western Pacific screen shares right now. Here's Roomba again on satellite imagery. The Western Pacific storm we haven't covered yet is Tropical Depression Leepi. It briefly regained tropical storm status earlier today before weakening again. And here's it right now. It went through the southern Japanese island, made landfall in South Korea, and is now coming back off, moving east-northeast to potentially impact Japan again. I'll show you guys the track forecast for Leepi right now. It's going to be down here. This is the warning graphic. It's moving east-northeast. It's expected to dissipate and no longer be discernible right before making landfall in mainland Japan again. You can see its past track history. Moved through the southern island of Japan, skirted the coast of South Korea near Busan, now racing east-northeastward towards northern Japan again. Here's the satellite imagery again. You can see rain from the system is already impacting land again. It's a very, it's very sheared. Almost all the convection stripped to the east at this point, but it's already delivering heavy rain again to Japan.
Straight, I've got the flatest for 91 and W.
All right, let's see them.
Oh, sorry, I've got to activate the screen share. Oh, here we go again.
Just don't let Slither up this time. All right, let's do it.
All right, here we come.
All right, perfect. Here's Leepi again one more time before we switch off. All right, so here's some floaters. Let's pull up this imagery right here. Here we go. This is 91W floater, slowly getting better organized.
Yes. And
it is
JTWC.
not expected. JTWC, yep.
Yes, I'm just bringing up what they're saying about 91.
Yeah, right now they say it's expected to develop, but it's probably going to occur beyond 24. They don't expect it to develop within the next day. However, development past 24 hours is likely with the system. Again, like I mentioned earlier, looking at the computer model to the left side of the screen, you can see it develop into at least a Category 2 typhoon behind 22W and potentially impact Japan as well at beyond 7 days, although it's too early to really set a track in stone for 7 days out at this point in time. By the way, if you have any questions, make sure to tag Force13 in chat. We're looking there. So we'll try to answer any questions you guys have. If you put them in chat, just tag us 13. We'll be sure to get as many questions answered as we possibly can.
91W is 13 decimal 163 degrees east. It's 20 knots, central pressure 1003. The JTWC has wind shear 10 to 15 knots. Sea surface temperature is 28 to 30 Celsius. Global models are in good agreement that this system will gradually develop as it tracks westward over the next few days. And maximum sustained surface winds estimated at 15 to 20 knots.
Yeah, and since we're on the track of 91W, if you don't mind keeping that screen sharp, I'll briefly go back to my screen. Let's take a closer look at some of the computer models for 91W. Here's the HWRF. You can see it kind of stalls it out in a similar location for the next few days, developing it into a moderate typhoon by the end of day 5 here. You can see it says 84 knots. This is too far out to say for sure, but it does develop the system into a typhoon. Looking at the GFS, we'll probably be able to see a similar story. Here's the GFS run for it. It's the 18Z. It also develops it into a typhoon by 120 hours, bringing it actually to Category 3 status on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale by a little bit past day 5, really. A potential major system that could pose a significant threat to Japan later down the line. Yeah, you want to say something?
I was just looking at the questions in the
Yeah, I see people trying to say that models indicate 99L becoming a hurricane in the Caribbean. I don't see any models that are saying that.
I don't know why. I don't know why, but I feel uneasy thinking.
It's probably one of the outliers, if I had to guess.
Yeah, people are trying to say many models. The GFS isn't saying it. If I go to ATCF, oh well, there's statistical there's models in the forecast strength that try to say it'll become a Category 2. Although it's important to note, and I'll briefly go back to my own screen and highlight this in the 5-day tropical weather outlook, is that the National Hurricane Center says that slow development of the disturbance is possible while it moves west-northwestward quickly, but by next week, the upper level conditions are expected to become less conducive for significant development while it moves into the Caribbean Sea. So you should keep in mind that odds for development are very low, and things really shouldn't develop with this system at all.
It all depends on the shear and the dry air.
Yeah, I would say so too.
That's the thing to look at. I'll quickly switch over to David's screen while I pull up the wind shear map mode right now.
And that's my main concern about this storm is, what if everything goes right for it? Because right now, a couple times before this 99L even became a thing, my main is having a storm that I'd like to call like a low riding wave, that basically it dodges all the negative that's in the MDR right now. And that's exactly what's happening with this. And if things go right, things could go way out of whack really quickly, and that's my fear.
Yeah, I mean, this right now, I'll pull up satellite imagery. Wind shear around is pretty light to moderate, really, but it's really disorganized right now. This is the current satellite imagery infrared. You can see it's really not organized. It's moving quickly to the west, or west-northwest, which is the speed of it's kind of hindering development to some extent. It's only a 20% chance of development within the next 5 days as well. So fortunately, it really doesn't look like we're gonna get anything out of this, but 20% risk really. And something interesting I want to check quickly is if I
Yeah, because
Full
most
zoom.
storms at this point, you usually see the chances either rise or decline.
Yeah, I mean, it
Because
doesn't really have much vorticity with it right now.
it's
It's just a really open wave, so I wouldn't really
yeah,
expect much from it
only
personally.
on uncommon occasions do you start off with chance wave that's delivered on the NHC forecast. Usually, it starts out as a low chance and then it progresses from there.
Yeah, this is a low chance system right now. 10% in the next 2 days, 20% in the next 5 days. It is in warm sea surface temperatures and pretty light wind shear right now. Um, Something I'm actually interested in checking quickly while I quickly go back over to David's screen. He's showing forecast tracks right now for
And for
Lane.
14, tropical depression
like we were talking about
14.
earlier, some of Japan might be at risk later down the line. What I'm going to do is pull up the Saharan air layer map mode quickly so that we can see what probably will hinder the storm from developing is likely going to be dry air. Although for some reason, Saharan air layer products are temporarily unavailable due to external issues. Okay, that's why it hasn't really been working. But what we've really seen over the past few days, I think Isaac actually posted an image in chat earlier
Strat,
that will show it to some extent.
Strat. You could go on Tropical Tidbits and look at the wind shear on there. They have wind shear maps on there.
Oh, I'm
It may
looking
not be
for
as
dry
good
air.
as
Looking for dry air.
Dry
They also
air?
they have water vapor imagery as well.
Yeah.
They do have water vapor imagery. That would work then.
I also
So
posted some imagery of Lane and the Western Pacific activity
Yeah, perfect.
above David there.
So here's the water vapor map mode. You can see darker colors indicate drier air. You can see
Okay,
there's a really big area of dry air directly to the north of 99L in this situation. Obviously, you can tell why Ernesto's subtropical has dry air moving into it from the west and southern sides. But you have a big area of dry air not only reaching into the Caribbean right now, but to the north of the system as well. And as it continues to move west-northwest, it's likely that this dry air significantly impacts the system and weakens it down to the point where it can't really develop.
Well, so far as I've seen it, it looks like most of it's to the north of the system, and right now it's in its basically its own little bubble at the moment. And,
yeah, I think that's why we've been able to see some increase of convection to the point where it can be warranted as an invest, really.
Yeah, and it looks like as though the dry air in the Caribbean isn't as intense at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. David, do you want to pull up some floaters on 99L for us?
No, just give me a minute.
All right, great. And other object in the Atlantic, like we were talking about just a second ago, is Ernesto up here a bit to the north, west of the Azores at this point. Fortunately, it's supposed to be more of a fish storm during its existence. Weak one at that. It's currently only forecast to peak at 50 miles an hour. Obviously, subtropical, you can see it has the comma-shaped dry air coming in from the west side, impacting it for sure. It's definitely not necessarily an impressive system on satellite appearance, but warranted enough to become a tropical cyclone at least. Orlando, what have you thought about Ernesto over the past day as it's developed into a tropical system?
I think honestly it's pretty interesting seeing how Debbie also formed around the same region and from the same cause.
And both of them are
both
expected
similar
unlikely
cause.
to develop at the same time. I think they were both 20% a day before they developed.
Yeah, this season has been extremely unpredictable, and that's something that I've noted since day one, and I think that's something that's going to remain all the way to the end of the season.
Yeah, right now we're at 4 systems out of 5 that have been subtropical at some point in their existence, and the record actually is 5 subtropical systems in 1 year. And we're in mid-August, to keep that in mind. So there's a chance that we actually reach a record like that, which is really unprecedented. This season has really been unusual, maybe somewhat attributed to the fact that development in the main development region is supposed to be more limited, and we're supposed to see more activity in the Northwest Atlantic. We've seen 3 of the systems so far in that area. Ernesto, Debbie, and Chris. And then the only fully tropical system we had at this point so far this year was Beryl, which was a really surprising small system that managed to become a hurricane somehow.
The floaters aren't available for the Atlantic
99L.
on the
Okay.
Caribbean.
Well,
Yeah,
you know what? Something I want to
that
do
side,
then.
as you said, is down.
Yeah, something I want to do then is actually shift back to the Eastern Pacific quickly. This is if you want to pull up some floaters of Tropical Storm Lane. Here it is on my screen right now. Slowly starting to organize and look slightly more impressive as we go on through the days. Not close to hurricane status yet, but it could potentially get there over the next day or two. They do anticipate it to become a hurricane tomorrow at Pacific time, according to the National Hurricane Center. I can actually pull up their forecast advisory right now. Here's Lane again. Here's the forecast track. They expect it to become a hurricane by 2 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, which is tomorrow. It's rather quickly getting better organized, so it's not out of the realm of possibility if it does that. Right now, here's the 5-day map for the system, expected to slowly move west and then shift to west-northwest movement. Like we were talking about earlier, potentially a long-range threat for Japan. Or not Japan, oh my god, Hawaii.
Yes,
but, that's not really certain at this point in time. Most of the models at this point that go past 5 days indicate that the storm will actually move south of Hawaii, although there's a couple outliers from the GFS that move it northward. I'll pull up a computer model right now, the GFS run for it. We'll go back here, and we'll click the GFS and go to lane, which is 14E here. Switch it to surface pressure and 10-meter winds. There would be lane right now at 6 hours from 18Z, 40 knots. Intensifies it to an over 80-knot hurricane. This run of the GFS brings it dangerously close to the Big Island, brushing it with tropical storm force winds before moving it away and shifting it to the northwest at that point in time. Obviously, that model is too far out to really say anything for certain regarding the storm. You actually have the National Hurricane Center's forecast advisory on it. I'll show that for you guys.
Okay, satellite imagery indicates that lane is strengthening. Central dense overcast continues to grow with a large banding feature in the western semicircle, expanding outflow in most quadrants. ASCAT data recently showed maximum winds of about 40 knots, so that is the current position, which is also near a blend of the latest VOAC estimates. Whilst the latest microwave data indicates that the inner core lane remains loosely organised, the large-scale environment appears to be favourable for further intensification. Low shear, wall warners 27 to 28, moderate levels to mid-level moisture or supporting strengthening at a higher rate than climatologically or something like that. However, since the inner core is not well established, intensity forecasts will be held just below rapid strengthening 30 knots in 24 hours for day one. And then we'd go out to 120 hours and they have 105 knots gusting 120.
Yeah, this system is expected to become another major hurricane.
Yes.
For a tropical storm, even though I'll pull up my screen quickly if you want to switch over to another imagery if you get the chance. It doesn't look that impressive, to be called a strong tropical storm or hurricane, but it looks pretty well organized at this point in time, which is, something to keep note that it does have the potential to intensify quite quickly. As if we go back over to wind shear and switch basins and go, that's the eastern Atlantic, not the eastern Pacific. Here's the eastern Pacific. Lane's going to be down here. It's closer to the bottom of the screen. And it's pretty compact and it's an area of relatively low wind shear. And it will continue to be like that for at least the next few days. you look here at shear tendency, here's the system. It's in an area of very low wind shear for at least the next 3 to 4 days. Obviously, based on its location, it's going to be in pretty warm sea surface temperatures as well, and that gives a pretty significant risk for the storm to intensify quite quickly. And if that happens, you'll potentially see a pretty significant threat posed for Hawaii if the storm moves further north than forecast. We got some questions in chat here. We did actually talk about 99L already. 20% chance of the National Hurricane Center, but we do have some concern for it considering the environment it's currently in.
I'd also like to note something about it is that while I was looking at the velocity map of the Atlantic where 99L is located, that area of velocity is actually beginning to consolidate more.
Yeah, I mean, the fortunate thing to see right now is that it doesn't really have much spin with it. Its vorticity is pretty low, and I'll quickly switch back to my screen to show that. Let's go to 850 millibar vorticity and turn back on my screen. You'll see it near the bottom of the screen. You'll see it near the bottom of the screen again. It has some vorticity with it, but it's not very strong and it's not very organized. The small vorticity that it has is pretty elongated at this point in time, so any development would have to be pretty gradual. That'll go to show if I pull up the satellite imagery here. Let's find it quickly. Here's Invest 99L satellite imagery. It doesn't have a lot of spin with it, and it's very broad and disorganized, which is why it has a low chance of development right now, because as it moves into the Caribbean, it will encounter more hostile conditions in terms of wind shear. But right now, it is in a conducive environment. If it had more vorticity and was better organized, it would have the chance to spin up rather quickly. It's just it doesn't really have that right now to really deal with. Do you agree with that, Orlando?
Yeah, it sounds pretty reasonable as a statement, but honestly, for anyone in that sort of region, the best thing I can recommend is just wait and see, because at the moment things are not looking too good for the system itself, which is a good thing, but things could change because forecasts tend to change a lot during a short period of time.
Yep.
And inaccuracies have to be perfected, and as a result, things could change. So right now it might seem that it's not a high chance of development and it probably won't develop, but then tomorrow it probably looks better. Or alternatively, it looks like it's starting to fizzle out completely.
And I think regardless, if the storm develops or not, if it maintains this kind of convection, the island should be watching it anyways, because it could pose significant rainfall threat for them, as well as rip currents, higher tides, gusty winds, you know. Even if a system like this doesn't develop, you still need to keep track of these things to keep yourself safe and, you know, make sure that you don't do anything that might end up getting you hurt. I think here's another point where I'm just going to pull up David's screen for a second so that we can actually shift back into gear towards the Western Pacific, because that's where we're seeing most of the activity at this point in time. 4 active systems there and 2 invests, one of which is expected to develop in the near future. I think what we'll start with in this area again is going to be Tropical Storm Bebinca in the Bay of Tonkin at this point in time, because that, in my opinion, is definitely the largest threat to land, just because of how long it's been in the area and the amount of rainfall it's been putting there. Here's the current 5-day forecast map for Bebinca. It's currently in the Bay of Tonkin, west of where this says it is right now, just because this is 3 hours old at this point in time. They do expect it to intensify slightly back to 40 knots. Earlier today, crossed the southern Chinese peninsula there as a tropical storm making landfall. But the thing is with this storm, the biggest threat is really, really heavy rain. It's stalled out in this area for the better part of a week now. Even despite it not having strong winds and not really being a tropical system for most of the time it's been here, it's been dumping very heavy rain on northern Vietnam, Hainan Island, and southern China, especially for a region that's been really hit hard by Sontin last month. This is just definitely just something you don't want to see. David, I know you're more in the Western Pacific and stuff because, you know, you live on Australia. So what are your thoughts with the system right now?
I'm concerned, well, as we've said previously, Vietnam, or that region, the massive amount of rainfall, and I'm a little bit concerned at the system that's going to come up behind this one is impacting land. And I think that could possibly be a typhoon, but that's one to watch. Then, as you said, we've got Lane over there in the East Pac. I've just been searching for information what the news is from Hawaii on Lane, but
Yeah.
again, as we mentioned, the West Pac, it's just not letting up.
Yeah, and what is it? We have 4 active storms right now. If I'll, show my screen again, we have Leepi, Rumbia, Bebinca, and 22W. Hector dissipated today after its long journey all the way from the Eastern Pacific through the Central Pacific and into the Western Pacific. One of the few storms to ever do such a feat. We have multiple updates on the channel about the storm. I actually organized them into a playlist earlier today if you guys want to go take a look at that after the stream's over. But we also have 91W and 22W, which I think are potentially the biggest threats in terms of wind. Rumbia is, it's a tropical storm. It's going to make landfall in Shanghai, but it's really disorganized. It's more of a broad area of convection that managed to centralize a little bit to be called a system. But it's not really impressive in particular in terms of what it looks like. The problem with 22W and 91W is that they're forecast both to become typhoons if you look at computer models and the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. Here's the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast for 22W. It's forecast to become a typhoon and approach southern Japan as one, ranging from Tokyo to Busan to the Ryukyu Islands at the day 5 time as a typhoon. Some models show it actually being stronger than what the Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecast says. Some show it weaker. But regardless, seeing another typhoon threatening Japan in the same way of moving westward towards the islands, which is not really something you usually see, but seeing that happen 3 times within a month and a half is really something rare to see. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, try to keep up with all these systems. I've got the latest imagery for 22W, 91W.
Yeah, and 91W is starting to look more impressive. That's why they're saying it's likely to develop just beyond a day's time. And if you look at the model actually shown on the screen to the left side, this is actually the GFS 18Z run. You can show it actually develops 91W into at least a Category 2 typhoon, and by the 7-day mark where this model cuts off, you can see it moving westward south of Japan. It's obviously too far out to say whether or not this storm would pose a threat to Japan, but 2 typhoons coming right back behind each other, posing a threat to an area that's already been hit by at least 3 or 4 storms this year. And has received a lot of rainfall since early July. Really big flooding problems in the region is really bad to see in particular.
And 91W, it's forecast to become a typhoon, or?
91W, according to models, is forecast to become a typhoon. The GFS forecasts it to become a typhoon. Euro does. HWRF forecasts it as well. And if you go far out enough in the GFS time frame, this is just speculation because it's so far out. You can't really trust this at all. It's, until it's within 5 days, you can't really say for certain. But the GFS shows this making landfall in a similar area to where it forecasts 22W making landfall. Like I said, it's too early to say anything for certain, but particularly for southern Japan, which was hit by Jangdari late last month, early this month, has already dealt with a lot of rain since early July. Seeing another 2 potential systems hit land there is really bad and not something you want to see at all.
Now, sorry, I was just wondering whether Tropical Depression 22W could absorb 91W, but just looking at the Joint Typhoon Warning Center's image, it's got all the systems.
What they're saying is that 22W is going to start moving northwest. It is already doing that, while 91W is supposed to stall in the same area for a few days, and that's going to really prevent much interaction from happening between the two systems. That's what the forecast says for it right now. That's always subject to change, but it's pretty likely at this point that these become two pretty separate systems. I just saw some. Sorry for continuing. I just saw someone say that the GFS has a pressure of 927 millibars off the Japanese coast. Keep in mind with the GFS is that it has a convective feedback problem, so it shows the pressure being much lower than it actually would be. If you're looking at that kind of model, you want to look at the wind speed that it says, because even if it says 927 millibars, it only shows 100 knots. If you were seeing a 917 millibar system, you'd anticipate a category 5. This shows a category 3, which is still really dangerous, but it isn't as intense as you would assume just by seeing 917 millibars on a storm. You were going to say something, David?
22W, that is the major one, a major threat to Japan.
That is the current short-range major threat, yeah.
And I'm just looking at the JTWC's track. The JMA has as a tropical depression, would you believe?
I mean, I believe it. It definitely is a very broad system right now. It isn't organized in particular to the point where, you could really argue it's a tropical storm. Although they forecast to become a tropical storm shortly and intensify quite quickly.
And Bebinca, they have it at... see, the JMA... they're also a little bit slow to update. There's been a huge amount of discrepancy with the information.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we try to do this, is so that we can provide information in case other services aren't doing it. Here's satellite imagery right now of 22W on my screen that I just pulled up. You can see why it's a depression, and it's clearly very broad and disorganized. It does have a closed low-level circulation, which is why it's a tropical depression. Rain still impacting Guam with the system. But it is starting to move to the north-northwest away from the area. It's forecast to gradually become better organized, intensifying to a typhoon. Current forecast calls for a peak at 85 knots, which would be a Category 2 on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale.
And they have 22W at 13.7 north, 143.9 east, 30 knots, central pressure 998.
Yep, and let's also take a look at 91W as well. I want to actually pull up some of the stats on that quickly, just to read them off, really. Let's see. 91W is currently at 13.4 degrees north, 163 degrees east. Only 20 knots maximum sustained winds, 1,003 millibars. Definitely not warranting tropical system status yet, though. But it is forecast to develop over the next couple days, and could pose another threat to Japan. I think now that we've talked for Japan a while, we should switch to the other storm that we haven't really mentioned much yet, which is going to be Tropical Storm Rumbia, which is currently in the East China Sea, forecast to make landfall in Shanghai, almost directly on Shanghai. I'm actually going to pull up that map for you guys right now. Here it is. Pretty wide wind field because it is a broad system. Forecast to intensify slightly to 40 knots before making landfall almost directly on Shanghai. This would be the third system to impact the area in less than a month. Yagi came in here just 2 or 3 days ago, Weak tropical storm did deliver some rain, but this system could bring stronger winds in general because it's going to be making landfall closer to Shanghai, and even though it's really broad, it's a bit more organized in general, and it probably will continue to organize over the next day or so as it continues to develop. So you could see a bit more of a threat to land with this system than we saw with Yagi just a couple days ago.
I've got the floaters up on.
Yeah, I saw that. I pulled up the floaters. Thank you for showing them.
Creepy up.
As you actually see it going into daylight time, you can start to see a bit of new convection over the center. It seems like it's kind of drowning out the dry air a little bit. What are you thinking in terms of the system in the past day or so?
Definitely getting better, and when we finish with the live stream, I'll have a look at the overall scene. I haven't even had a chance to look at the models, but trying to keep up with all the systems. And for my own personal position, this is the most intense period that I've ever seen.
Yep. And also, you know, just to split off your screen for a second, we were talking about rain. You know, we'll actually show the rain forecast from the GFS, the most recent one at least. You can look at it in the stream in a second. Here, this is the GFS 18Z. It shows going into Shanghai about 100 milliliters of millimeters worth of rain, mostly staying to the northern side of the city, which is pretty fortunate to see. It really shows that the system isn't really organized very well, not a big threat. The threat I see here is with Bebinca back in northern Vietnam. They forecast at least another 300 millimeters of rain on top of what we've already seen in the past week. Really bad flooding in the Hanoi region and northern Vietnam, which is, you know, really unfortunate to see, considering Son Tin did something very similar last month, and, you know, this much rain over such a short period of time really brings severe flooding. Actually very curious to see if we can get some reports out of Vietnam and southern China that we can show in the next stream to really highlight the dangers that the system has really been posing, as it's been stalled out in this very similar area between the Bay of Tonkin and just east of Hainan Island for the better part of a week now. Here's the current forecast map. You can see, if you look to the right side, and I'll zoom in just a little bit, how long it's really been here. Each one of these is 6 hours. And you can see a whole scatter track of dots here showing the system before it developed and after it developed, all in this general area. It's fortunately starting to get a move on to the west-southwest at this point in time, going to be making landfall just south of Hanoi. That town will just be missing out on tropical storm force winds, fortunately. But rain's obviously the biggest threat, and it can be a threat even when the storm isn't near land. If I go back here quickly and show Bebinca on satellite imagery, you'll be able to get what I mean from that pretty quickly, because you have a whole separate burst of convection that is not connected to the core of Bebinca. Keep in mind the system's over the Bay of Tonkin right now, so this region between Hainan Island and northern Vietnam. That's where you see its core convection, which is expanding and starting to reach northern Vietnam. But earlier today, you had this separate burst of convection, which is still really heavy, that crossed over the area, and it's been delivering a lot of rain to the region. And you've seen separate areas of convection like this for a really long time now. Really a big problem for the area. David, what are you thinking about this?
Major flood. Sorry, just looking at the local news over in Vietnam. Major flood risk, river flooding, mudslides, landslides, and road closures. So, Vietnam is being severely impacted on by tropical storm Bebinca, and it's the Vietnam southern region of China, and 100 to 200 millimeters, 4 to 8 inches.
Yeah, and that's on top. And let's keep in mind that's on top of what's already come down in the region, and they've already had
Yes.
a lot of rain with this system. It stalled out for, I don't know. We were covering this system before it developed at least 5 days ago. So it's really dangerous to see in general a system like this stall for such a long time, because even though it's very weak in terms of sustained winds, the amount of the amount of rain it's dealt is a really large amount, and having that much rain in the ground, even weaker winds can uproot trees and cause pretty significant damage.
And they're saying some regions could see up to 12 inches.
Yeah,
And 4 to 8 inches by the weekend.
Yeah, and it's just a really dangerous situation to see in general. I think we're gonna quickly switch back again though to another system that we haven't really covered much today, and that's gonna be Tropical Depression Leepi.
Leepi.
Cleared of Korea, cleared of South Korea at this point. Heavily sheared as well. Convection strip to the east. It took a pretty weird path where it kind of went around the broad area of low pressure that's currently formed into Rambia and became a typhoon unexpectedly, then weakened a bit slower than anticipated and made landfall on the southern Japanese island, went through it, skirted the southeast coast of South Korea by Busan, and is now moving almost due eastward back towards Japan. Rain from the system's already reaching back into mainland Japan again.
You don't think it will come back for a second go?
It already looks like it is. Rain's already reaching mainland Japan again.
I'm just looking at the floaters, which I've got on the screen.
Yeah, and we see these floors. You can tell how heavily sheared the system really is. None of that convection is near the center at all at this point. Keep in mind the center is right off the coast of South Korea, and almost all of this convection is significantly displaced from that at this point in time.
Now, what have we got to... Well, we haven't actually got anything to on the eastern Japan. It's mainly to the, southeast? Southeast?
Yeah, and I'll pull this up quickly. This is why you see all the convection stripped away. This is some areas 60 knots of wind shear impacting this storm right now. And if it were to somehow survive all the way up towards the northern Japanese island, that's 120 knots worth of wind shear, which is really absurd to see. Right now, the center of the storm is under 30 to 40 knots of wind shear, but its convection is under up to 60 knots of wind shear, which is obviously why the system is quickly fading away at this point. While we're here, it's interesting to note that Rambia is currently under low wind shear, so it has a chance for some intensification. 22W is under low wind shear, that's why it's anticipated to strengthen. And 91W is also in lower wind shear, so that's why it's also forced to strengthen. Bebinca, this is why you see its convection being moved westward. It's under moderate to high wind shear, 20 to 30 knots. So you're seeing a system like this really deliver a lot of rain because convection is being stripped that way. And you see, what is it, 4 other systems right now also being impacted as well. We're about to run out of time, so I just want to do a quick rundown again. We just went through the Western Pacific, so let's do a little track back to the Eastern Pacific. Here's Tropical Storm Lane again, and I'll show that quickly. 45-mile-an-hour sustained winds right now.
1,003 millibars.
Looking pretty organized right now, but not very strong, as data has shown through ASCAT passes. Anticipated to strengthen, is currently in an area of pretty low wind shear and warm water. Wind shear is expected to remain low for at least the next 3 days, so there's a chance for rapid intensification. NHC forecast currently calls for it to be a high in Category 3 by day 4 before starting a potential weakening process at day 5. Later down the road may pose a risk to Hawaii. We will be covering and tracking the system carefully for sure. The other system we have is Ernesto, subtropical storm Ernesto in the North Atlantic right now. Unexpectedly developed. It was at a 20% chance of development before it rapidly developed into a subtropical storm. Only 40-mile-an-hour sustained winds right now. Some strengthening is possible over the next 12 to 24 hours before the system rapidly moves into colder waters and is no longer expected to be tropical at that point. It's expected to be post-tropical by 36 hours to 48 hours from now before getting absorbed into a trough and impacting Great Britain. That's all the time we're really going to have for tonight. So I want to thank you guys all for coming out and watching the stream. Keep in mind that we do this a lot of the time. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. All the links are actually below. Facebook and Twitter. Make sure to check us out there. Support is also appreciated in ways like Patreon. We have that open. If you can help us out there, it's much appreciated. Also through super chats as well. It's really nice to do. We had some action there earlier today. It was really appreciated. But that's really going to wrap things up for tonight's stream. We don't really have much else to say because we're out of time. So, David, do you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye, and look forward to coming back with the latest with a live stream or an update.
All right, take care, guys.
And then, if you think I'm done with that, I'm not done with that. How did I feel when I turned 18? I felt like I was trying to... I heard a click.